started. You ready, Tyler? Well, we thank you for joining us tonight. Today is the pastor's birthday, and he texted me about or called me about this is about 2 o'clock. Said he was going to be out of town. He wouldn't be here tonight, and asked me would I preach again. I said, yeah, I guess. Don't ever turn down the opportunity, Sister Mildred. I told him yes, I would come up with something. So had been on the road all day, and I was like, I got to the house and just began to pray and ask God what He would to have for me to speak. It's something that I've caught myself doing a lot lately, and that buzzing you're hearing is probably my box up there. Thank you, Stevie. But we find ourselves a lot, as I just sat there and I kept hearing the Lord speak over and over and over, we're pondering on the past. How many times do we sit, Brother Benny, and we talk about the old days? I've been telling my family a lot. This seems like the last 2 weeks. I've been talking about my mom a lot, and I've never had my mom or my dad come to me after they passed, but I've had my dad come to me 3 times in the last month, and some of them was good and some of them wasn't. And it was enough that I had to pray and question the Lord, because sometimes, when they tell you when the people like that come to you, it means something. And but I've been pondering a lot on the past. I told my family with us just having the new grandbaby, and I said, Mama would be proud. Mama would be proud to finally have a great granddaughter. Other than just Riker. Riker was her world, but so we've been talking about that and talking about a lot, pondering on the past. And but sometimes I think we get too caught up in the past. We want things to be like they used to be, and want things to be like they were way back. The days of your word being on your handshake is no longer. You can't go down and and if you ain't got, we used to have charge accounts down at the Phillips 66. Mr. Saunders had the station down there. Sister Debbie's daddy had the station down there in front of Aldi, and I think everybody in town had a charge account down there. And you'd go down there, not because you didn't have the money, but you just go down there and get the gas, and you pay the bill every week. But that's the way things were in the past. You know, we all remember, all of us in here, except probably Tiger, pulling up the gas station, the guy checks your oil, cleans your windshield. My boys wouldn't know what to do if they pulled up to the gas pump, Rick, and somebody come out and pumped their gas for them. Those days are gone. There's things of the past that we've moved on. We live in a fast society. I talk about this a lot. The pastor talks about it. We want everything now. We want everything right now. We want to go through. They say the average person waits in line at Chick-fil-A 7 minutes. 7 minutes. Chick-fil-A is trying to get that number, or under 7 minutes. And you can go to Chick-fil-A and it'll be wrapped around the building 2 or 3 times. But they say the average car, now you go to this McDonald's, you'll be there 70 minutes. Lord help, I just can't. Me and McDonald's went round and around this week. Brother Sidney, I went through the drive-thru and they kept my debit card. And I argued with them people. I ain't going to go there because I had to pray. But it had stuck it in my bag, I guess, and it fell in my truck. But, oh, it was a mess. But I try not to go to McDonald's. But that's what we want. I try not to eat fast food, period. Because that's what it is. It's fast food. And so I was in a meeting all day today with the state overseer and all the state staff up in Orlando getting ready for the new convention coming up in July. And the first thing they were talking about was, well, you know, we used to do things this way and we do things that way and we do things this way. And he finally looked at them and he said, you know what our theme is? He said, our theme is Florida Forward. It's been our theme for several years. It's Florida Forward. It makes you stop and think when he said that. He wasn't saying it being sarcastic, but we tend to dwell on the past. We want things to be, you know, eggs are $5. I don't know, they may be more than that now. I don't know, they're $6, $7 a dozen. You know, I can remember when they used to be 89 cents. I told my boys the other day, the first gas I bought for my truck at 16 years old, it was 75 cents a gallon. That was what I had to buy. That wasn't what I seen my mom and dad buy. It was 25. And that's what I'm saying. We can go back and we can tell stories. I heard somebody say the other day, a 1965 Mustang, one of the hottest cars there was in 1965, was $3,750. Yeah, exactly. $3,750. I can remember when I turned 16, my mom and dad took me to the car lot. Told me, said, you can buy a brand new truck. They bought me in a Isuzu. That's what they bought me. Said you can have a brand new truck. Hey, I was just proud to get a brand new truck, Rick. You could get a brand new truck, but I couldn't spend $1 over $99.99. I could not spend $10,000. I had to spend $99.99, and I got me a brand new truck. But that's the things of the past. We can go on and talk about this. You know, we talk about the old church services. I've talked about it. I can remember seeing my mama and Brother Tommy and Sister Debbie can probably remember wanting these wrap the people up in the church flag. Take the flag off the pole. Take the flag off the pole and wrap them up in the church flag and pray them through to the Holy Ghost. Wrapped up. I mean, that satin flag, they had to be dying. But they taught us kids, you know, I mean, my mama sat right there at that age. That's where we sat, my whole family. And mama taught us at that age, when the Spirit began to move. I can remember when the Spirit began to move and they were getting ready to cast a demon out. You were taught, if you were old enough, you got on your knees and you began to pray. If you didn't do nothing, you just shouted, Jesus, 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 Jesus. And I can remember her and some of the others would take their hands and would take the little ones and they would cover their mouths. Because that was what they said in the old days, that was the way the demons would enter the kids, was through the mouth. So they would sit there and look like they were smothering their kids. But that was a rim of protection. You know, but that's what we done. I mean, I'm going to get into this in a minute, but it's things that we talk about in the past. You know, everybody wants a quick, fast religion. We want things, you know. I was talking to Brother Benny. We was talking about old trucks, me and the pastor and Justin this week. And we were talking about how you could get a Chevelle or a Camaro. Rick, you probably remember, put you a big block motor in it. And that thing, it just fly. But now they're taking these old cars and these old trucks and they're putting these new motors in them. They're putting these new aluminum engines in them out of these brand new pickup trucks and these brand new cars. and putting all the electronics from the brand new stuff over into the old cars. And they're going way faster than they ever did, because they're taking new technology and mixing it with the old cars. And we've been talking about, but it's things of the past, and we can go on and on and on and talk about, there's traditions that's passed down. What's the story with the girl that cut the end of the ham off? She kept cutting the end of the ham off every holiday. And she finally said, why are we cutting the end of the ham off? I don't know, ask Mama. Mama said, ask Grandma. Grandma said, I don't know, great-grandma did it. Just so happened great-grandma was still alive, Brother Benny, and they asked great-grandma, said, why are we cutting the end of the ham off? And she said, well, honey, back in our days, the ham wouldn't fit in the oven. So we had to cut the end of the ham off to make the ham fit in the oven, because they didn't have 30-inch ovens back then. They had them big old thick insulated ovens with the little bitty doors. Everybody remember them? I mean, I'm not so young that I don't remember some of that stuff. You know, but a lot of things have changed. But there's things that we can look back at our past, and we need to learn to take it. I'm going to get into this. It says we all carry memories. Some are filled with joy, others are filled with regret. But when we pause to ponder the past through God's eyes, we begin to see more than just what was. We see His hand, we see His faithfulness, we see His guidance, we see His mercy. If we can begin to look back at the past and see that, what God has brought us through. You know, me and Billy, we get together and we talk about our childhood, and we get on the phone. We said, you know, we were raised poor. I tell everybody the clothes I wore, Brother Sidney, come from Lisa's brother Joey. Very seldom did I ever get brand new clothes. They were hand-me-downs because we just didn't have. I don't hold that against my mom and them, but we didn't have nothing. My mama drove whatever car somebody gave her, and I had to learn young how to fix it, Rick. 12 years old, my dad brought my mom a Volkswagen Beetle. And if it wasn't for me and Scotty Keaton, we'd have never got to church half the time. I learned at 12 years old how to work on a Volkswagen Beetle. But that's what we had. But you know, I look back at that, and I can think, me and Billy was just talking about this just a couple of weeks ago. He said, Scott, we never, ever went without. There wasn't never a year that we went to school. It may have been the day before school started, but my daddy would get my mama some money, and we would finally get to go get a little bit of new clothes that we could go to school with, a brand new pair of clothes or some brand new shoes. We never done without. But I had a mama that was faithful and prayed, and she taught us stickability. And we look at that, that's all in the past. That's all behind me. But I look and I can say, God, because you were faithful at what you did, and you seen mama through it, and you seen grandma through it, and I've seen these saints do this, and I've seen these church services. I was telling somebody the other day, I said, I can remember seeing the Shekinah glory in the church house. I can remember being in the state convention and seeing the building fill up with fog. But there wasn't no smoke. It was the fog of the glory of God. I can remember seeing Bruce Scotton preach. He's preached in this pulpit. I can remember seeing him preach under the power of God. And he was a big old man, tall and big man. He was preaching and jumping. And as he said his last word of his message, his feet went up over his head and he landed on his back. I thought he died. I've got it on video somewhere. I thought he died. But he laid there, and the pandemonium, was you there? Pandemonium fell. There was about 1,500 people in that convention, and they began to run and they began to shout. And they come up, and I can remember this one man, he come up and he shouted all the way around Brother Bruce, speaking in tongues and just running in a circle. But we had church for another hour. They wound up coming in there. We were at the Lakeland Center in Lakeland when that happened. And the people that owned the venue come in there and shut the lights off on us and told us we had to get out. They went in and they run them out of the sanctuary. We went out into the hallways and they still had church. They were still running and shouting in the foyers, Brother Benny, or Brother Sidney. That's pondering on the past. Those things I can remember, but we don't see those things today. We don't see those things. I preached Sunday night talking about when you got up and you went to the altar, there was people that would meet you at the altar. Never hesitated. Sister Catherine or Sister Blunt or Sister Betty Brown. They didn't care who you were. They would detect, Sister Catherine could detect you before you ever sat down in the pew. Me and you need to talk. She knew, she had a tune, an antenna that knew that you needed some Jesus. And you needed somebody to take you to the altar. I seen her get Tommy Beavis by the ear and say, come on. And take him straight to the altar and pray. Whatever was bothering him and whatever was on him, she prayed it off of him. But we're in a society today, and it's the church in general. It's the church in general. That is, our conventions have changed. I told Kenya, I said, I don't like what they're doing. But I don't rebel against it. But I can continue to ponder on that, Brother Benny. That really has nothing to do with me. That's just 2 days, 3 days of my life that they asked me to be a part of. And I'm going to do it. And I'm going to pray that the power of God falls, Sister Robin. But we can continue to do this. It says, so today we take a moment to ponder not on the past, or to ponder on the past not with shame, but with gratitude, and let your memories become altars of praise. I'm thankful for my past. I wish I had retained half of what I learned in my younger years in my classes. The only thing I remembered was the books of the Bible. And I've quoted those to you. But Sister Frances would have the games. She'd bring one candy bar or one little bag of chips with her on Wednesday night. And she would give a lesson. And it would be all these questions of the Bible, Brother Sidney. If you were a visitor, you didn't know. But you listened. If you continued to come, you wanted, it was the same questions over and over, just in a different order. But we wanted to win because the winner got that one candy bar. Most of us shared it. A lot of them didn't. I ain't going there. We had some that wouldn't share if their life depended on it. But most of us would share that Mr. Good bar or that Hershey bar or whatchamacallit or whatever she brought. You know, but it taught us the Bible. You know, we learned Methuselah was the oldest man in the Bible. Well, not only did you have to know that, how old was Methuselah? Then we went on. You know, who was in the ship when they cast the nets out? Peter, James, and John. I mean, there's a lot that I probably couldn't answer today. But I wish I could. But that stuff I'm thankful for that I learned, because when I read the scriptures today, it takes me back to that. And I'm able to say, wait a minute, she instilled that in us back then and brought us in to today. You know, our past is not always good. I was in a discussion last Sunday with the gentleman that's just bought the old movie theater. We was talking about when it was built. Built in 1969. He's trying to find out from some of the locals what the first movie they ever showed there. I said, don't ask me because I couldn't come. We were laughing about it. I said, but I will tell you, I got to see one movie, and we've laughed about this before. I got to see Herbie the Love Bug. And my mama's sister took me. That's the only movie I got to see, Sister Mildred, in a theater until I was grown. That was I Googled it, Herbie the Love Bug come out in 1975. I can tell you that. I was here in 1975. We were laughing about it, though. But that's part of our town. That's part of our heritage. But we all have those personal stories that tie into specific things. Sister Mildred, you can tell stories from your mom. The past, our recipes and our old-fashioned cakes that we eat today are a thing of the past. They've been passed down. There's very few people. I just seen something today of a lady that had passed away and said her specialty was a Coca-Cola cake. So, whoa, a Coca-Cola cake. I didn't think, but there was 2 or 3 people that ever made a Coca-Cola cake. Pastor Beavis said he had to preach a funeral last week of somebody that he knew the son and his mother had passed away. She was a Christian, but she wanted him to preach her funeral. It was a graveside. It said they stood out the grave, the family stood out there. Said they were talking about eating chocolate gravy for breakfast. He said, when I got up to say my part, he said, I looked at him, he said, where y'all from? They said, what do you mean? We right here in Sebring. He said, no, if you ate chocolate gravy for breakfast, you're from Alabama. And you go home, you go to Alabama, they all got chocolate gravy for breakfast. I don't like chocolate gravy for breakfast. And their sausage gravy, Brother Benny, is brown sausage gravy poured over top of a biscuit. But that's the way we talk about it. That's things of the past. But there's things in our past that we can reach back and we can grab. I told my boys the other day, I said, you want an old hymn sang? I said, you go get Sister Debbie Parker. And I mean that with all my heart. I said, as a drummer first starting, you were my favorite song leader that we had. And I mean that with all my heart. She was my favorite. She pulled out, it seemed like she always put a little more life in the songs than some of the others did. Maybe it was because I liked her style. Learning the drum, I liked your style. You were always one of my favorites. You know, we talked about, there's different things that we can reach back there and grab those memories, but we can't ponder on them for too long. Brother Sidney, if you ponder on the past, then you're going to miss what's in the future. And that's what we've got to get to take those memories and pick up those good times, Sister Debbie. Pick them up. Let's put them in our pockets. Use them when we need to. I don't have my mama to run to. I used to go over and just sit on days that I didn't have nothing to do. I'd just go over and mama always would either sit in her recliner, watch TV. But anytime I come over, she didn't want you to sit on the couch. She wanted you to sit at the dining room table. She'd get up off of her. I said, "No, Mama, let's just sit there." "No, I want to sit at the table." She said, "Because I got to sit up." And she'd want to sit in a chair in the dining room table and talk to you so she wasn't falling asleep on the couch. But we would sit and we would begin to talk. And she'd say, "Well, you better go in there and say something to your daddy. He's going to get mad." Or he'd come out of his bedroom. "How long you been here?" "A while." "Well, you can't come say hello?" But that's just the way he was. Or there's times I would have to go over and say, "Mom, I got to say something to him, then I'll be right back." But I can't ponder on those days. I told Ken the other day, I said, Brother Benny, I still have not went back to the cemetery. I just can't do it. It's just something I can't do. I don't know what it is, Sister Mildred, I just can't do it. But it's not dealing with it, but I can't let that bother me. There's days that I get in my truck and I head that way. I've made it all the way to Circle K and I've turned around and went back home. But we can take the things of the past and gain the wisdom from it. That's what I want us to get on, focus on right now. There's a lot of wisdom in the old saints. There was a lot of wisdoms in the old teachings. There's a lot of good things that come out of the past. But if we can take the good things and begin to take that wisdom, there's some that I wish Sister Gloria could quote you a scripture and tell you where it's at more than anybody I've ever seen. But that's not something, brother, your dad was the same way. Could pull up on the job. A lot of us back when I was young in my 20s, we all worked together, Brother Benny, on a construction site. My dad employed half the church. L.D. Parker would show up 3 or 4 days a week. There was a many a days that if he hadn't showed up on the job, our crew wouldn't have eaten lunch. He didn't know that. But he would show up, Brother Benny, and drop his tailgate. He always carried him a little tailgater. He called it his tailgater grill. He'd have him a cooler, and he'd have 5 or 10 pounds of hamburger meat, a couple gallons of sweet tea, and some water. And he'd fire that little grill up. He could cook about 4 or 5 or 6 hamburgers at a time. He'd be out there flipping them hamburgers. But you'd go up there and he'd gather everybody around. And he'd say, "We're going to pray." He'd have his Bible out. And he'd read you a scripture that he had gotten a word for that day, Brother Sidney. And he'd read you a scripture of the day and talk about it. All you wanted was a hot hamburger. But Brother L.D. would do that, then he would feed us. And then he'd want to run your equipment before he left. But there was a lot of times like that. That was wisdom. If I could quote half of what he did. But he told me he would start every January and read the Bible through. And if he happened to finish it, he would start over. I forget how many times. He told me one time, it was a bunch, how many times he had read the Bible from cover to cover. But if you want to know where a scripture was, if Sister Gloria couldn't get it, Brother L.D. could. But those were people that had a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge. But we take that. All we can do, there's times I was just thinking the other day about Brother JB preaching about David. Pastor does it well, shifts his collar. Every time I see Brother Milford's hands, I think of Brother JB. Brother Milford's hands was as close to Brother JB's as they'll ever be. They were just massive. He could put his hands on top of my head and pick me up. He did it one time when I was a kid. He was so big. But what I'm saying, we can keep dwelling on this. But you know, we can, remembering God's past faithfulness gives us courage for the unknown that lies ahead. 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12. Thus far the Lord has helped us. God's track record is perfect, and yours is too if you pay attention to it. I'm going to say that again. God's track record is perfect, and yours is too if you pay attention to it. God has put you through what He's put you through to get you to where you're at. You wouldn't have had the faith to stand and believe for healing in your body had God not put you through what He's put you through to bring you through to now. Brother Benny, 25 years ago, you couldn't have stood and believed for healing in your body as you do now. God knew where you was at, but He knew there was a time, okay, Benny, this is it. This is the day of change. It goes on to all of us. Yeah, I think back, as I said a couple of times ago when I preached, I think I was the last one of all of the ones my age to pick up the mantle and realize that God had called me to preach. And to take my steps slow and still take it slow. But I had a bishop to tell me when I was preaching on that reconciliation, he called me off to the side. He said, I know this one, and I know this one, and I know this one. The pastor talks about his sons of thunder. That's the ones that he's released out of from underneath his ministry. He began to name them, talking about their gifts and their anointing. I'm not saying this, I'm just telling you what he told me. He said, but you're different. I said, what do you mean I'm different? He said, you carry something different because you sat under it longer. And he said, and you took it, and you've took in more of it, and you've worked on it more and more and more. And because you've done that, you carry a different type of anointing. I said, well, I don't want an anointing that this one has. I don't want to preach like that one. I don't want to be Bishop Kevin Wallace. I don't want to be Tommy Bates. I don't want to be Ron Carpenter. I don't want to be Joel Osteen. I want what God has for me, and I want to walk in what God has called me and allowed me to walk in. That way my gifts can operate under what God has given me and allowing me to do. And if I will walk in that, then God will honor my footsteps. The same thing goes with anybody in the ministry. I don't want my boys to step up and do what Dad's done. Pondering must move us. It should shape our perspective, renew our hope, and motivate obedience. Reflect, then respond. Gratitude should stir us to worship, and the lessons from the past should lead us to change. The lessons from the past should lead us to change. In other words, what we did and had to deal with in the past, when we get out of that, we don't want to deal with it no more, so we're going to change. As I preached about striking the arrows on the ground, not realizing the changes I was making in my life when I was preaching on that reconciliation. When God was beginning to reconcile me, Brother Sidney, not understanding what the beating on the ground and the victories of my life. Until I began to look at the past. Begin to look at the past. Because he was faithful then, he'll be faithful now. Somebody just released that into a song. Faithful then, faithful now. I think Stephen Furtick's the one that just released that, isn't he? Faithful then, faithful now. But they took that faithful then and faithful now, and they went back and dug the old hymns up, Sister Robin, and began to sing the old hymns and say, well, he was faithful then, but he's faithful now. Don't let your past be a prison. Let it be a classroom. Oh, we can talk about that for a while. Don't let your past be a prison, but let it be a classroom. Let it be a testimony. Let it be fuel for your faith. I'm preaching to myself. I need the moves of the past that I can see to motivate me and to fuel me forward. To fuel me to keep going and to do what God's called me to do. But you look back and you can see, today I was coming home from Orlando. I'm driving pretty fast. Not as fast as some people, but I'm driving. I come upon this new Chevy Tahoe. And I'm looking at this Tahoe. It was an odd color. And I said, that thing's sitting funny. It sat low to the ground. It had a couple little different things on the roof, Rick, but it wasn't I said, that looks like a cop. Had a regular Florida tag just like mine. So I'm in the fast lane, he's in the slow lane, so I got a car in front of me and a car behind me. And so I'm just riding the guy, and we just went right on around him real slow. I went on up and got over. I'm running about 82. I'll be honest. So we went by this cop, turnpike. I hadn't been around him. I was on the phone. I hadn't been around him not even 2 miles. Here come this little SUV by me, flying. I felt the wind off of it. Was I on the phone with you? I was on the phone with Jacob. I said, this guy must be doing over 100. I said, because I'm doing 82. He blowed my doors off. Sister Diane, I seen that Tahoe back there. The front end of that thing picked up a little bit. Brother Benny, the back end sat down, and here he come. He chased that guy for about 4 or 5 miles before he finally caught him. That whole Tahoe lit up red and blue. That guy probably had no idea that he just blew by a cop. You say, well, what do you mean by that? God had his hand of mercy on me. But he wasn't looking for us. He was probably just riding. He got out. He was dressed just like I'm dressed. Jeans and a shirt and boots. I don't know what, he was a plainclothes deputy is what they call him. But somebody got a ticket. And probably got more than that, because as fast as he was going, he probably now has to go see the judge and tell the judge why he was going that fast. But God had his hand upon me. Because the guy in front of me evidently wasn't paying no attention to see that was probably a deputy. And as I went by him, I looked in his windshield and I could see all them little bitty lights. I said, yeah, that's a deputy. I thought, well, he may be drug agency or something, But no, he got that guy. But that's God being faithful and had his hand over top of me, watching me. There's times like that we don't realize what God is really doing. But we have to take the past, as I said earlier, and put it in our pocket. Carry the things we need, leave the things we don't need behind. That's the problem. We're carrying so much baggage from the past that we don't have room for what God's trying to give us new. How many times we've been on vacation, you packed a suitcase, get where you're going and go shopping. Oh, I like that shirt. Wow, $10? The next thing you know, we've bought 2 pairs of shoes. Me and Candy flew to Nashville, Tennessee about 5 years ago. She surprised me with a trip to Nashville. She didn't tell me when I left the house that we were going to Nashville. She told me I was going to Orlando. She said, to pack your suitcase. Well, Brother Benny, I packed me a suitcase to go to Orlando. She said, well, you may want to take something else. I said, well, it's a Friday. We got church on Sunday. So I only need this many clothes, this many shirts. I'm not one that carries 5 pairs of shoes. Well, she didn't tell me we was going to be gone 7 days. Well, we got to Orlando. She had to go buy me a suitcase. She had to buy me the clothes because it was cold in Nashville. This is what I took like this to wear. We were going to Orlando. But we got to Nashville and we went shopping. I said, now you need to remember, we didn't drive up here, we flew. And because we flew, we had to pay $35 per suitcase on the cheap little airline that we booked, where you pay for your luggage. I said, we ain't saving no money if we got to go buy another suitcase and pay another $35 to fly everything we're buying back home. When we would fly to Alabama, they would all go shopping. I'm saying, listen, y'all need to remember, whatever you buy has to go in your suitcase for you to get home. Justin went and bought a guitar one time. I said, son, we're flying home. I know, Dad. He flew all the way home holding the guitar. But I said all that to say, we take a suitcase up. We take so much stuff with us that we don't have room to bring back what's new. We flew over to Indonesia. You took this many suitcases. I didn't have to worry about buying that. I couldn't buy nothing over there. I was considered a giant. The largest clothes they sold was a medium. They sold a small and a medium. That was all they sold. I said, well, if I'd have lost my luggage, I'd have been in trouble. But we got over there trying to buy souvenirs. And stuff was cheap over there. Electronics were cheap. You could buy an iPhone for $100 over there, because that's where they're made. We got to Singapore. It was the electronic capital of the world. Cell phone chargers were 50 cents over there. But I told them, I said, you need to remember, what we buy, we got to get home. It's a 27-hour flight. If it don't fit in your suitcase, you got to carry it. But if we pack so tight with the past, then we can't put in what God is trying to give us today. And if we're so hung up on the past that we can't deal with what God wants in the future and what God's got for today to carry us into the future, then all we're doing is carrying around old baggage that becomes stinky, and it becomes rotten, and it becomes dirty because it's been packed in a suitcase for 25 years. Now I feel like preaching. But because we've packed it's in a suitcase, and we've carried this past around with us for 25 or 30 years, it stinks in the nostrils of God. But we've got to get to the point that we can allow God, take out what I don't need. Take out what I don't need. We were talking about you yesterday. We were out here cutting wood, getting ready for the barbecue, and our chainsaw blade went dull. Well, the city says, you know what? I've got a thing at home that'll sharpen that chainsaw blade in just a few minutes. I said, well, leave it to Brother Sidney. Justin said, if anybody's got anything like that, it's Brother Sidney. He said, there ain't nobody today got anything like that in their garage, unless you're a tree man. But then we began to talk about the past. I said, well, my granddaddy, he could always do this, and he could do. Then pastor got started. Well, my dad always. That was the past. This man had it today. He got in his truck with that chainsaw blade, Rick, went home, put that thing in his whatever he had. I've never even seen one. Said it was some kind of deal. He put that thing in there. About 25 minutes, he was back with a sharp chain. Now, you know what I'd have done, Brother Sidney? I'd have went over here to Taylor Rental and bought me a new one. And I know them boys that was helping us, that's what they would have done. Well, you see, they didn't even know how to tighten the blade up. I don't mean that wrong. I don't mean that wrong. But that's the thing of the past. They gave me one of their new chainsaws and told me to crank it the other day. I grabbed that chainsaw. Whoa. You'll break it. I said, what do you mean you'll break it? He said, you pull it and you let it go and you sit there and it winds something and it starts the motor. I said, excuse me? He said, yeah, you go. And you wait and it goes, woo. But don't crank, you go. 2 fingers. It's some kind of new technology. No, I'm over there, I got that chainsaw, boy, I'm going to crank it. They didn't let me crank it. But that's, all the new ones are self-adjusting chains, Brother Benny. They didn't know to loosen the 2 nuts up and stick the screwdriver in there and turn the screwdriver a quarter of a turn. Justin said, I just loosened the screws up and snatched the blade out. I said, oh, no. That's why it was loose again. But this man had what I needed today. Because if not, it would have cost us about $28 probably for a new, that was a steal. It would probably cost us about $28 or $30 for a new chain. But because somebody had wisdom from the past, he was allowed to use it. He saved us a little bit of money yesterday. But the pastor took them two boys of mine out there to the ditch full of oak wood. He said, boys, this is what we need. No, we don't need that log. I want this log. And he was trying to tell them why he didn't need that log and why he wanted this log. This is what we're going to cook with Saturday. This is what I need to cook. This one here will do this. But that knowledge from the past is something good. This thing's trying to fall off after all this time. But I thought to myself, if anybody would have it, he would. You saved today. We cut them last 4 or 5 pieces. That's all we needed was 4 more cuts. I told Brother Sidney, I said, we'll just let you take it home with you and we'll finish it Saturday. No, I'll be back here in 20 minutes. I thought, 20 minutes? Sharpen a chainsaw? He was back. But we do that in our faith. It's time to let some things from the past go. I preached a message years ago. I went and got all mine and Stevie's road cases from our sound equipment, piled them all up. I had them piled up, Sister Robin. I had one on wheels. I made it halfway down the aisle and they went to falling off. I kicked them. I brought all my junk to church. Anybody remember me preaching that? I brought all my junk to church. By the time I got to the altar with my junk, it was scattered from here to there. Literally. It was junk. And I preached and I talked about how we need to take this junk and leave it at the altar. But you know what? My wife told me, she said, you need to get rid of that junk. Talking about the junk that I strode. Not what I was preaching about. She said, you're hoarding it up. You got too much junk. Well, Brother Sidney, there's days I go out to my shop, it's a mess. You know, it's time to clean up. Then you go out there and you sit and you think, I just had a cleanup day last week. I had Stefan over. Stefan says, you really throwing that away? Brother Sidney, I had a skill saw I'd had for 20 years. The cord was only this long, and it was cut in half. Now, it was completely covered in dust and spider webs. That thing hadn't been used. Now, you could have probably put a cord on it, and it worked for you. But when I've got 3 cordless battery-powered saws that will do everything I needed to do, why am I hanging on to that? My dad, he hoarded up more corded tools than anybody. I had this pile, and I began to look down at them. I've got that one in battery powered. You know how it is today, Rick. Everything we got's battery powered. And I used to think there's no way that you can drill tap cons in with a battery powered drill. Buddy, I went and bought me a Milwaukee. I'll put it up against anybody's corded tool. So why hang on to it? So you know what I did, Brother Sidney? I finally come to the realization it's time to let it go. I throwed it away. I had lighting that I had bought from Mickey Mouse, literally from Walt Disney World. I got a steal of a deal on it, $20 a piece. Sister Robin, they were that tall. It took me and Stefan both to get them out of the case. You can imagine how big the boxes were on wheels. Jacob said, Dad, what are you going to do with those? I said, me and Stefan pulled them out and I set them on the concrete. I said, take that excavator you got there and crush them. And that's what we did. We crushed them. You say, well, you crushed a lot of money. If I only gave $20 for it, it couldn't have been worth much, Brother Sidney. And I've had them, but I'm going to use them. No, I've had them 6, 7 years and ain't never touched them. So they got crushed. But I learned in all that. Candy come home, she said, you really threw all of that stuff away? I said, I sure did. I said, there comes a point in time that if you hold on to stuff, had no idea I was preaching this. If you hold on to stuff and hold on to stuff and hold on to stuff, then you got so much stuff. And everything's got an attachment. But that's what we have to do sometimes, Brother Benny. Let go of this stuff that's in the past. I had to go in there with the mentality, if it ain't been touched in the last year and a half, and I had to check myself. This is 2025. This ain't 2017. That's the mentality I had to use, Brother Sidney. I had to sit down and say, we're in the 4th month of 2025. So if I didn't use it in 2024 and didn't use it in 2025, I don't need it. I don't need it. But I'm cheap. It was junk. It was junk. Now, I've got common sense to know when something's worth some money. You better set that aside and check it. And I've got a few things set aside, and that's what I'm going to do. For my Uncle Bill, he collected whole scale trains from the time before I was born. When he passed away, they didn't know what to do with him. He didn't have no kids, so he always said they went to me. I've got an Amtrak, supposedly a whole Amtrak train out there from the 50s. To me, I'll never do nothing with it, but I'm going to find somebody that needs it. It's not about the money, but it's not going in the garbage. Hess trucks, stuff like that. But there comes a point we've got to get rid of the past. Get rid of things we don't need. Rid of things we don't need. I went through, I found some more notes where didn't realize my dad had wrote a lot of stuff in his last days. I found a notebook of his where he would write stuff. Some of it's funny. Some of it's funny. It's hilarious the way he thought. But my mama's got notebook after notebook after notebook. She was a writer. She journaled. Now, I'll never have the time to sit and read all of it, Sister Wanda. Books. She would write in every day. I'm just going to have to take, because I know there's stuff in there for me, because stuff I've found so far. There's a jacket I wear. I wore the day Jacob got married. I sat in the room getting dressed. Sister Robin, Y'all know I don't wear a suit. How many times y'all seen me in a suit? I had this jacket on at Jacob's wedding. We was in this little hotel room getting ready, and I reached in my pocket. I reached inside, and I said, there's a paper in here. And Brother Sidney, I pulled that paper out, and I unfolded it. I've only wore this jacket maybe twice. And in this jacket was a letter from my mama. I sat down on the edge of the bed, and I began to cry like a baby. If I can remember half of what it says, it said, the day you read this will be a day that you're having to let go of something. And it was word for word for word of everything that was happening that day, with the exception of it saying Jacob getting married. Katie said, why are you crying? She said, what do you got? She thought Jacob had done. I said, read this. She said, who's it from? I said, it's my mama. We have still yet to figure out how that letter from my mama got in my jacket. But I know it's there. When I preached in Arcadia, that letter was in my jacket pocket. Now I know where it's at. But stuff like that, God will allow things from the past to come up. But there's some stuff we've got to let go of. I know tonight's been a lot of reminiscing, but that's what we do. But we can take that and apply it to our lives. Glad you had that chainsaw sharpener. Because last thing I want to do is have to worry about cooking barbecue Saturday and still cutting up wood. But the pastor still says we don't have enough wood. I said, well, if we don't, we'll go back over to the bush pile over there and we'll get some more. But I think we got plenty. He's excited for Saturday. We've been telling everybody. Those guys that helped us yesterday, he brought his crew over, pressure washed all the sidewalks and the concrete. We had one guy, he said, boss, your gutter's falling down. He said, yeah, I know. Here he come with a ladder. He fixed our gutter back there on the back of the house. I told him, I said, Carlos, that gutter's been broke 10 years. Well, why haven't you fixed it? I said, because it's on my to-do list. But he didn't just put a screw in it, Brother Benny. He went from one end to the other to make sure it was fixed right. And I told him I invited him to be here with us on Saturday. I've been telling everybody about it. This is we always gain one or two families through this. It's an awesome outreach. I want y'all to be praying. I encountered a man and woman. They're a pastor. Destiny's mother and Shalene, her husband, that used to come when Destiny first started coming to church with us. You know, he didn't speak any English. We tried everything to talk to him, but he'd sit in the service and she would have to tell him everything. We looked into every kind of electronic equipment, and there is nothing. I asked him today, we was talking about it today at the state office, and there is nothing. So he went on, he's found this house that has a church in it over here behind McDonald's. It's a Spanish Pentecostal church. And this young man and young woman, they're in their mid-30s, if they're that old. Got a couple of kids. They've started this ministry. They're looking to connect with an organization. They do a lot of stuff with the Church of God, but the Church of God already has their own Spanish church. And so, because they have their own Spanish church, they wanted them to join with them, and they're doing it's a completely different ministry. Well, just so happens they're doing street ministry. These people's calling, they go to the dairy farms, and they have a bus. And they go out 2 days a week to the dairy farms in the afternoons, and they set up. And they can load 25 kids on this bus that they've built into a classroom. And they go to MacArthur's and some of these others, and they're teaching these kids to speak English. They're taking clothes and stuff to these migrant workers. They're going to the farm fields. And he said, brother, he said, me and my wife live on a bare minimum. He said, every dime that this church takes, we put back into the ministry. And you could tell by looking at them that that's their life. He said, but we've got so many kids that we pick up on Sunday mornings. They've taken their carport to their house and extended it. It's all, wouldn't none of us probably attend church there unless God really told us to. Had 6 window units in it. She said, we'll have 150 here on Sunday morning. None of them speak English. She said, but we're to teach them. We're teaching them as much in English as we can. But they're looking for a church like this to connect with. They don't want money. They don't want money. They're wanting to connect. They want to be a part of an organization. And so I told the pastor and his wife about our event Saturday, and they say they're coming, bringing their kids. I said, well, take the bus out. Gather up as many of them as you can get and bring them. We'd love to have them. They said they just show up with the bus and toot the horn, and the parents come running and bring them and put them on the bus and send them. She said they've got so many kids now that they're having to use every room in their house on Sunday mornings. But that church has just been on my mind. He told me, he said, Pastor, he said, we're all going to the same heaven. We're all trying to achieve the same goal. He said, I'm trying to win souls just like you are. He said, I can't reach your people and you can't reach mine. He said, but we're all going to be in the same heaven. I said, you know what? I said, my mansion's liable to be right next to yours. I said, it makes me good to know that that's where Destiny's mother and her husband are going, is over there to that church. They're very involved in that church. She would rather be here, but we can't help him. We can't minister to him because we can't speak to him. That's a sad thing. He loves the spirit here. I've talked to him a little bit, but it's a lot of farm workers and migrant workers that's over there. But just be praying for that church. I'm hoping that they come. They want us to be involved in some of the things that they're doing. They're looking for some resources that we have to help them, and I told them I would gladly help them. They said they have an event coming up. They need some stage. I said, well, I know where you can get some. I got 7 pieces sitting in my barn. Well, I'm looking for a microphone. I said, I can help you with that too. But that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for money. But we had some stuff that we were donating, and they took it. Somebody had gave us women's socks, knee-high women's socks. Knee-high. Women's socks. 12 pairs of socks to the case in 130 cases. I had a pallet in my barn. If my stuff went, other stuff had to go too. But I wasn't throwing it away. And they took it. Well, my first thought was, in the flesh, they're going to have a yard sale and they're going to sell every bit of it. That's what I told Keeney. I said, I had to ask for forgiveness because that's what I thought. They said, no. Said, we bundle up so many clothes every week and we take them. Said, it may take us 4 years to get rid of these socks, but we'll get rid of them. I said, well, I'm glad you can store them for 4 years because I can't store them no more. But that's what they're looking for. So I'm going to get with them and see. A lot of times we have yard sales. We take what's left over with our clothes to Faith Farm. And I found out if Faith Farm doesn't like it, they throw it in the garbage. Maybe we can be a blessing to that church where they can bless some of these in their churches. He said 90% of them come off the dairies. But we'll ask the ushers to come. I pray that I said something that again, Kenyon needs all your orders in tonight, right? Especially with the Easter baskets. If you have Easter basket orders for sure, she needs to know. She's got the computer ready to go. I think if you need your Easter eggs, is there some ready if you need them tonight? Or no? They're not packaged yet, but I think they've got I think everything is everything dipped? Everything is dipped. They just have to sprinkle some last bit of stuff. Then they'll be ready to go. We thank you all those that's helped. Sister Mildred, Sister Diane. Thank you for all your help. Brother Sidney, thank you for coming yesterday. And I told him, I said, that little old man, he pressure washed more with his little pressure washer than them guys. We was telling them guys. We told them guys yesterday, said he's over there with the pressure washer half your size and he's washing more than you are. They had a big, one of them things on wheels, Rick. Brother Sidney was showing them up. But we thank all of those that has helped. I think Tammy's been here at night helping. Jacob and Destiny got to come home yesterday. Baby's doing good. She's doing good. So they'll be here Saturday. So everybody's doing good. We're thankful for that. Everything went well. So still trying to get little Oakley. She ain't having this. She grabbed his blanket today, Brother Benny, and told him, mine. That was his blanket, her blanket, she said. She snatches his hat off his head. She's something else. But you go ahead, brothers. Anything else you got?
Just don't forget, if you signed up to bring something for Saturday, please be sure to bring it. If you can't, something's happened that you can't, or something's changed, just let us know. We'll get it covered.
We are still cooking extra Boston butts.
Yeah. If you want to buy a Boston butt, I think they said $40.
$40. I think I'm cooking 16 right now, it looks like. We're cooking 16 Boston butts and cooking some chicken. So,
just bring your families.
Yep, just bring your families. Come and be with us. We're going to start eating, 10:30 or 11?
It starts at 10:30, but if we can have people here at 9:30 to get
Yes,
stuff
we need
set up and
all the help we can get setting up.
and we'll need lots of help cleaning up, the fun part.
We're going to be here at 5 cooking. So last thing we want to do is cook at 5, then have to go pull a second shift to do setup. So I've got some that's going to be here at 5 to cook, but we'll do what we got to do, get it done. So we're going to eat. I think we're planning on eating around 12:30. The petting zoo will be here. The trackless train is coming. that's going to be here. The bounce houses, face painting. We got a lot of stuff planned. And some people said, they told me the meeting today, I was telling them about, they said, your church does all that. So what are you talking about? That's nothing for us. I said, that's nothing for us. I said, we've done it so much, we can do it with our eyes closed. They said, you have all of that? I said, we have every bit of it. Well, what's it cost? I said, very minimum. I said, we need the trackless train. I said, me and Stevie, we went and built one. We needed this, we went and built one. We've got a bounce house coming. We've purchased one that is ours for the small kids. Because there's always a problem with the little small kids getting in the bounce house and getting trampled on with the big ones. So now we have a bounce house. We acquired one, a nice bounce house just for the little kids. It gets big kids in it. We're going to put them on the ground. The little kids are going to trample them. I'm just joking. But we got a lot of stuff happening. A lot of stuff happening, Brother Beavis. Like I said, he's just out of town for the night. But today's his birthday. So his birthday, today's Destiny's birthday. I seen somebody else's birthday today. So Tammy's birthday was yesterday. Oakley's birthday's next week. We're just full of birthdays. So a text message. Somebody telling me they can't cook, want me to cover for them. Y'all pray for Brother Stevie because he's going to need resuscitation between now and Saturday. He's going to need a divine touch from God. We'll ask that you stand. We'll see you on Saturday. If Lord doesn't come, if not, we'll see you on the other side.